Hey guys, tonight we descend into a storm-slicked world of divine digestive issues, rebellious nanny goats, and that one time the king of the gods got crammed into a glorified clay pickle jar. You're going to explore ancient myth at its most unhinged, slow-walking barefoot through slippery cave moss, while someone named Cronus snacks on infants. It's warm. It's weird. It smells faintly of old cheese and patriarchal insecurity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is, because I'm weirdly obsessed with that. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up beneath a damp overhang of Mount Othrys, which smells of burnt myrrh, scorched goat hair, and unresolved father issues. The clouds overhead are bruised and rolling, and the wind tastes like someone left a bronze shield in seawater too long, somewhere nearby. Cronus, the big boss titan, the one with the scythe and the subtle eating disorder, is stomping around the mountaintop, muttering something about fate and too many mouths to feed. You're just a minor immortal at this point. Nothing fancy. Not yet. You're barely divine, your toga still itches like you bought it off rack at a discount oracle stall. But you are close enough to hear the rumbling tantrum of a titan lord who's been told one of his kids will eventually overthrow him. And because this is Greek mythology, the obvious solution is eat all the kids, naturally. Cronus isn't subtle about it. He swallows them whole, like awkward, squirmy vitamins. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, plop, plop, gulp. And you, crouching behind a large mushroom with sentient intentions, are trying very hard not to imagine the gastrointestinal consequences of ingesting 6 living deities. It's kind of tragic, really. He's not even mean about it, just paranoid. He thinks he's doing the right thing, preventing chaos, delaying prophecy. But he ends up with a very full stomach and a very empty heart, which if you squint is kind of the vibe for half the Greek pantheon. The rain begins to hiss down in streaks, and you scurry into the cave deeper, past ancient etchings of stars and fish, and something that looks suspiciously like a toilet. It's colder now, the kind of cold that makes your teeth hurt and your thoughts slow. You pass a shrine to Rhea, Cronus's wife, and the long-suffering mother of the snack-sized gods. She's the only one not totally losing her mind. Yet. And then, a glimmer of something under a stone, a bronze sickle, engraved with fading symbols, blood offerings, lunar cycles, and what might be an IOU from Uranus himself. You know this is the weapon Cronus used to castrate his father. No biggie. That act alone set off a chain reaction of sky versus earth grudges that still echo in modern weather patterns, or so says a particularly dramatic professor from the University of Athens, who claims that ancient sacrificial sites correlate with regional wind shifts. Historians still argue whether this was coincidence or climate ritual. You're cold, wet, and very aware that you're in the prequel chapter of some celestial soap opera. You try to rest, curled next to a glowing patch of fungus which hums softly in D minor, and dream of a world where immortals solve their problems with therapy and herbal tea instead of swallowing relatives. But no such world exists here. Not yet. Above you, thunder groans not like a clap, but like a cranky sky deity shifting in his sleep. Somewhere far below, on the island of Crete, a goat is nursing a baby boy with sky-coloured eyes and a truly unreasonable destiny. That boy will change everything. But for now, all you can do is close your eyes, hope Cronus doesn't hear your stomach growl, and wait for the story to pick up speed. You wake up to the sound of chewing. Not polite chewing, not breakfast in bed on a rainy morning chewing. No, this is the thick, wet, vaguely metallic gnashing of someone consuming something that really shouldn't be consumed. It's Cronus again, and he's just eaten Poseidon, or maybe it was Hades. Hard to tell from the echo. Either way, that's 5 divine children down the gullet and a prophecy that still refuses to vanish. You peek out from behind a stalagmite, careful not to knock over a pile of discarded bones that look suspiciously like divine molars. You'd think swallowing your own offspring might slow a person down, emotionally if not calorically, but Cronus looks oddly spry for a titan with a belly full of gods. The worst part, he hums while he digests. That humming follows you as you creep through dripping corridors lined with moss and gilt. You're starting to realise that immortality isn't all it's cracked up to be. There are no instruction manuals, no user agreements, just a constant string of terrifying relatives and cosmic expectations. Still, Rhea, the mother of the Godsnack combo plate, has had enough. She's decided not to let Cronus eat this next child. She's been watching him closely, noticing the little things, how he always hiccups after eating a deity with domain over the oceans, how his breath now carries a hint of burnt olive oil and despair. So when she gives birth to Zeus, she pulls the oldest trick in the mythological parenting book, the old baby swap. You don't see it happen. You just hear whispers and frantic footsteps and the unmistakable clink of a swaddled rock being offered up like it's the real thing. Cronus, tired and gassy, doesn't question it. He gulps the stone down, mutters something about indigestion, and wanders off into a thunderstorm to sleep it off. That rock, by the way, was supposedly enshrined at Delphi later. Tourists took selfies with it before selfies were a thing. Scholars still argue if the original Omphalos, the navel of the world, was a sacred meteorite, a symbolic placeholder, or just a very confused piece of landscape architecture. Either way, you now know that someone somewhere tricked a titan into swallowing gravel, and you're a little proud of that. Meanwhile, baby Zeus is whisked away to Crete, where the plan is to raise him in secret, away from digestive danger. You're recruited not officially, just sort of dragged into it to accompany the divine infant and help the goat-nanny keep him alive. The goat is named Amalthea. She's bigger than she looks in frescoes and smells faintly of fermented honey. She has eyes that seem to know more about prophecy than most oracles. You help her milk herself a sentence you never thought you'd live through, and you bottle it for the screaming, gassy future god. Zeus, even as a baby, has that look. The I will rule over thunder and fire and marital chaos look. But for now, he just screams and throws up in your lap. You rock him gently, wiping divine curdled goat milk from your robe with a fig leaf, and wondering if this is what fate looks like up close, sticky, loud, and wearing a makeshift diaper made of celestial moss. There's an old cave nearby, supposedly guarded by the curette's armoured dancers who clang their swords together to mask the baby's cries. It sounds dramatic, but the clanging is mostly offbeat, and one of them has a limp. Still, the effort counts. If Cronus catches wind that one of his kids survived, it's back to the god buffet. And so your days pass feeding baby Zeus, dodging suspicious titans, inventing lullabies in ancient Proto-Greek. One night, while the wind howls outside and Amalthea snores like a divine furnace, you dream of a future Olympus golden pillars, echoing halls, gods with gossip and thunder and terrible table manners. You wonder if you'll live to see it, or if you'll be turned into a pine tree for helping. It's not the worst fate. At least pine trees get to sleep in the sun. You wake up nose to nose with a goat. It's Amalthea again. She's licking your forehead in that gentle, slightly alarming way that only divine goats can. Her breath smells like time and existential dread. Beside her, baby Zeus is gnawing on a chunk of polished stone like it's a teething biscuit. You're not sure if this is part of his divine development or just a concerning personality trait, but you make a mental note anyway. Future thunder gods should probably not eat rocks. The cave is quieter today, wrapped in that kind of stillness that happens when all the predators are elsewhere. You sneak outside for air and find yourself staring out over the craggy slopes of Mount Ida. It's green, yes, but in that sharp, uncomfortable way, the kind of landscape that judges you while you walk. Far below, you glimpse mortals going about their business, unaware that the future king of the gods is pooping into a woven basket 3 feet from your left elbow. You sigh, a long, slow, ancient sigh, because raising Zeus is exhausting. He screams a lot. Not a regular baby scream, no. This one's got force, the kind of scream that cracks tiny fissures in the cave walls. You learn quickly to plug your ears with moss before nap time. Amalthea tries to help, but she's more of a nurturing presence than a practical problem solver. She does bring you clumps of edible roots now and then, which is sweet, if slightly passive-aggressive. One morning, while Zeus is napping and the curates are clanging away in some offbeat interpretive war dance, you stumble across a fragment of an ancient inscription on the cave wall. It reads something like, "He who cannot be digested shall be crowned." You're not sure if it's prophecy, graffiti, or the world's first Yelp review, but it gives you a chill, because now you're starting to realise the scale of what's coming. And then the lightning starts. Just little flickers at first. Static pops around the baby's fingers, sparks when he sneezes. But one day, you catch him giggling, actual divine giggling, while zapping a beetle with a tiny crackle of celestial fury. You take the beetle outside and apologise to it under your breath. This is the moment. You suspect that Zeus begins to know what he is. And that's when things escalate. Amalthea is struck in the horn by a wayward bolt during one of Zeus's tantrums. She's fine, she's a celestial goat, after all, but the horn breaks off. You cradle it gently, it feels warm, buzzing faintly with residual power. A few centuries from now, someone will call it the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. It will be passed around in myths, filled with endless figs and impossible wine and symbolic fruit. But right now, it's just a broken reminder that this baby is not going to stay a baby for long. That night, you and Amalthea sit by the cave entrance, watching stars crawl across the velvet sky like slow-burning embers. Zeus sleeps for once, possibly dreaming of clouds and dominion. You chew a dried fig and wonder aloud. Why goats? Because really, what is it with mythology and goats? The Norse have them pulling chariots. The Egyptians feared their eyes. Even the Romans couldn't resist giving Pan a goat's bottom. Historians still debate whether this was due to goats' wild temperaments, their association with fertility, or just the fact that they were incredibly useful animals with a healthy disrespect for boundaries. Your fig gets stuck in your teeth. You sigh again, and somewhere far above, Cronus stirs in his sleep, burping softly and dreaming of vengeance. You awaken to thunder, not dramatic. Shakespearean thunder, just a low, petulant grumble from deep beneath the earth. Cronus has indigestion again. You'd almost feel bad for him if he hadn't swallowed 5 of his children like slippery jelly beans. The sky is grey and heavy, pressing down on Crete like a judgment. Baby Zeus is teething. He's been chewing on polished bones, feathers, and once tragically a frog. The Curetes continue their clangfest, now adding rhythmic foot stomps in what they claim is a sacred war dance, but you suspect is just divine boredom. You're tired. Your back hurts. Amalthea's fur is shedding everywhere. But then Rhea arrives. Yes, that Rhea wearing the look of a mother who's had enough. She's done hiding. She wants her children back. So does Zeus, apparently. Because today he's officially too big for swaddling and has begun practicing godly stares in the reflection of a puddle. The plan is simple, which should have been your first red flag. Simple plans in Greek mythology tend to end with someone getting turned into a shrub. Still, you're roped in. The goal: get Cronus to drink something that makes him throw up everything. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and the rock. Can't forget the rock. So you help craft the concoction. It's a brew of mustard, wine, ancient herbs, and for some reason no one questions fermented beeswax. The smell alone makes your eyebrows curl. You deliver it in a goblet shaped like an eagle's face, because presentation matters. Cronus, oblivious and still bloated from yesterday's divine stew, accepts the drink without much fuss. And then it happens. A sound you will never forget. A deep, wet, celestial herk that shakes the sky. Out they come 5 dazed adult gods, slightly damp but weirdly well preserved, followed by one very confused rock. The siblings immediately begin shouting over each other, wiping themselves off and complaining about the lighting inside their father's stomach. Poseidon's hair is somehow perfect. Hera is furious. Hades quietly pockets the rock. Historians, by the way, still debate how literal this moment was. Some say it symbolises a shift in cosmic power, a metaphor for the younger generation overthrowing the old. Others claim the vomiting scene was added later to spice up the myth for dramatic public readings. and a few brave classicists argue it was never vomiting at all, but symbolic birthing. Those scholars rarely get invited to conferences. Meanwhile, you're standing there holding an empty cup and wondering if any of this will ever make sense. Zeus, now towering and radiant, turns toward you. His eyes crackle like blue firewood, and for a moment, you see the future war, thunder, betrayal, temples, statues, and so many pigeons landing on marble heads in Rome. He smiles. It's a surprisingly soft smile, the kind that says, "I'm going to overthrow the Titans now. Want to come?" You do not, but you go anyway, because someone has to pack the snacks. You are now officially a soldier in the most melodramatic war the cosmos has ever seen, the Titanomachy, which, if you're wondering, is ancient Greek for 10-year intergenerational screaming match with boulders. You don't have armour. You have a wool tunic and sandals that squeak when wet. But Zeus insists you'll be fine because you're technically immortal and very good at carrying things. The battlefield is, well, all of Greece. Mountains become hideouts. Caves become morgues. Rivers change course overnight. The Titans massive, brooding. Elemental forces with resentment issues take one side. The Olympians shiny, dramatic, emotionally unstable take the other. And you mostly try not to get flattened by a flying pine tree. Your job starts small. You help ferry thunderbolts freshly forged in the smoky caves of the Cyclops, who grumble and bicker in volcanic baritones. They gift Zeus the iconic weapons in exchange for, quote, not being forgotten in modern retellings. That deal didn't quite pan out. Poseidon gets a trident. Hades gets a helm of invisibility, which he keeps losing. You once find it under a pile of sacrificial figs. The fighting is chaotic. The air stinks of sulphur, ozone, and stress sweat. At one point, you trip over the river Styx, which is less dramatic than you expected, more of a large stream filled with ominous frogs. Every time someone swears an oath on it, the frogs croak louder. You suspect they're unionized. There's one day you won't forget the Mount Othrys incident. Zeus, aiming for theatrical effect, hurls a bolt the size of a temple straight into the mountainside. The rock explodes in a shower of gravel, divine light, and 3 Titan interns who'd been on a lunch break. It's unclear whether they survived, but one of them definitely yelled, "I just wanted to be a farmer on the way down." You spend the night camped with Hecate, the goddess of torches and crossroads. She offers you roasted chestnuts and tells you that everything is cycles, even war, even gods. Her presence is warm, eerie, and oddly comforting. You wish she'd stick around more in myths. She deserves better PR. By year 7, everyone's tired. The Titans grow restless. One of them, Iapetus, starts doing interpretive sky dances instead of fighting. The Olympians are snippy. Zeus demands more lightning polish. Hera won't stop holding passive-aggressive banquets. Demeter keeps growing wheat where nobody asked for it. You, meanwhile, are just trying to get through it without being turned into a constellation. A scholar from the 3rd century CE once claimed the Titanomachy wasn't a war at all, but a metaphor for seasonal changes that the Titans represented old, agrarian deities, and the Olympians symbolized a newer, urban order. You read that theory on a scroll once while hiding in a bush. It made sense. Then the scroll caught fire. You blamed Zeus. He did not apologize. Finally, in the 10th year, you wake up to silence. No thunder, no screams, just a soft breeze that smells like scorched victory and old ash. The Titans are gone, imprisoned in Tartarus, which is, in your experience, less a place and more a really inconvenient hole in the floor of existence. Zeus stands triumphant, hair singed but proud, and declares himself king of the gods. There is no applause, only you, Amalthea, and a tired Cyclops clapping slowly in the distance. Now that the war is over, you expect peace. But Olympus is not built for peace. It's built for hierarchy, vanity, seasonal festivals, and the kind of interpersonal drama that makes mortal soap operas seem restrained. The new headquarters of the gods sits high above the clouds, a gleaming palace sculpted from sky marble and political tension. You arrive holding Zeus's extra sandals and a sticky jar of nectar he insisted on bringing himself. It leaks. There's a council chamber with thrones, 12 of them, although nobody seems to agree who should sit where. Hestia graciously offers hers up to Dionysus a few centuries later, but right now she's still gently rearranging the cushions to avoid conflict. Zeus proclaims himself ruler of the skies. Poseidon gets the seas. Hades, still wearing the invisibility helm, far too often claims the underworld, which nobody contests. The room echoes with awkward throat clearing. You don't get a domain, but you do get assigned to Olympus logistics, which, in divine terms, means making sure nectar deliveries don't crash into the sun and that someone feeds Cerberus on Thursdays. The early days of Olympus are rocky. The gods don't know how to do divine government. They squabble a lot. Ares keeps trying to invade meetings with a sword and no agenda. Athena rolls her eyes so hard you fear they'll detach. Aphrodite insists on golden cushions for every chair. Hermes steals the cushions and sells them to a minor wind god. The real problem, though, is Zeus. Victory has gone to his head and possibly his biceps. He struts. He makes declarations with unnecessary hand gestures. He demands songs, temples, and flattering frescoes, most of which depict him holding lightning bolts and looking vaguely oiled. You catch him once trying to practice a royal smirk in a still puddle. He asks if it's intimidating. You tell him it looks like he sat on a lemon. He doesn't laugh. There's a growing discomfort in the air. Not fear exactly, more like tension wrapped in divine patience. The other gods are starting to notice his tyranny, his entitlement, the way he rewrites events to make himself the hero, like how he insists the Titanomachy was entirely his idea. You were there. You remember Hera doing most of the strategic planning and Poseidon accidentally taking out 3 titans with one tidal tantrum. You whisper this to Athena once. She nods without smiling. One night, you walk past Zeus's chambers and hear him speaking to himself. Or maybe not himself. You catch the name Meti, a titaness, supposedly devoured by Zeus for her cleverness. He says her name like a question, like regret. Scholars still debate if she's really gone or merely trapped in his body, whispering strategic advice from beneath his godly sternum. Some ancient philosophers claimed Metis was the source of his wisdom. Others argue he consumed her to silence inconvenient truth. You slip away before he sees you. Later, over a quiet breakfast of ambrosia toast, Hera suggests calmly, politely, that Zeus take a break. Just a small retreat, maybe fewer thunderbolts. He chuckles and declares he'll double his lightning output just to prove he's fine. You wince, because you know exactly where this is heading. One of the minor wind gods bumps into you that afternoon and mutters, "Someone should really put him in a jar." You laugh nervously, then pause, because maybe someone should. The idea starts as a joke, a whisper over nectar, a wink between immortals. Wouldn't it be funny, someone says, if we just popped Zeus in a jar for a bit? You're not sure who said it first. Maybe Hecate, maybe Hebe after one too many honeyed figs, maybe you. Jokes have a way of turning into plans when you say them in Olympus. At first, you laugh. Of course you do. Zeus, the thunder-hurling, ego-burning, prophecy-skewing Sky King stuffed in a jar like pickled olives, ridiculous, unthinkable, logistically difficult. But the laughter never quite fades, because Zeus is getting worse. He's issuing thunderbolts for petty infractions, a cloud nymph forgetting his name, a mortal artist depicting him with a slightly crooked nose, Hermes calling him dad in public. He's redecorated Olympus 4 times this month. Everything is gold and mirrors and self-portraits now. There are even statues of him, holding statues of him. It's exhausting. So the whispers grow louder. Hera nods more often. Athena starts reading scrolls about containment spells. Even Hades, who normally stays out of Olympus affairs, preferring the quiet company of ghosts and existential dread, writes a strongly worded letter signed in underworld soot. And you're asked to help design the jar, because you once spent 6 weeks cataloguing amphorae in a forgotten wing of the Mount Ida caves. And now you're the jar expert. You're not thrilled about this legacy, But here you are sketching mystical containment runes in olive paste on rough pottery shards while trying not to draw the lightning bolt upside down. The plan is elaborate. Complex magic, collaborative divine trickery, and a pinch of improvisation. The jar must be huge, not physically, but spiritually. It must withstand storms, screaming, and ego. Prometheus contributes the clay formula. Hecate blesses the seals. Hermes agrees to distract Zeus with a fake thunderbolt recall notice. You're given the honour of supervising the placement of quiet ceremony. No trumpets. Just ancient power humming through marble corridors and a faint smell of singed sandalwood. Then comes the day. Zeus struts into the council hall mid-rant about how thunderclouds should be renamed Zeus Mists when the jar is unveiled. It glows faintly. He pauses. You hold your breath. And then with a flick of invisible strings and a flash of complicated geometry, he's in. Gone. Contained. The room is silent. Not awkward silent. Not someone made a joke about Dionysus's sandals again silent. No, this is cosmic silence. Heavy. Wide. The kind of silence that follows world-changing moments or very long eclipses. You approach the jar. It's warm. Buzzing. It smells like ozone and expensive pride. From within, you hear distant muttering. Something about misunderstood greatness and I invented weather. Hera lets out a breath so deep it ripples the wine jugs. Poseidon claps. Athena smiles, just once, and writes something in her endless scroll. You go back to your cave that night and sit beside a fire made of lightning kindling. You're not sure how to feel. You helped trap the king of the gods in a jar. You also remembered to double seal the lid, which might have been smart, because it's starting to rattle. At first, it's peaceful, like when a hurricane finally passes and you realise your roof is gone. But the silence is kind of nice. Olympus, without Zeus, begins to breathe differently. The air loses its ozone snap. The sky flickers less. The furniture stops levitating every time someone delivers bad news. Hera starts sleeping again. Poseidon spends more time composing sea shanties no one asked for. Hestia throws a potluck an actual potluck, not a divine metaphor for interfamilial tension. It's awkward, but edible. And you're tasked with jar maintenance, which, in divine terms, mostly means standing near it once a day to make sure it isn't vibrating itself into oblivion. It sits in a chamber guarded by layers of wards, logic loops, and an extremely polite Hydra who now moonlights as a receptionist. The jar still glows faintly. Occasionally, you hear Zeus complaining about the acoustics. It's not all spa days and godly detox, though. Aphrodite is starting to worry Olympus has become boring. She says this while draping herself over 3 reclining nymphs and painting her nails with crushed pearl. You nod sympathetically while scrubbing the jar with a brush blessed by Hesiod. The real trouble begins around day 10. The jar starts leaking. Not physically, nothing spills. But things change. Clouds outside the palace hang lower. Rain begins falling up. One of Apollo's prophecies gets delivered backward and contains nothing but the word turnips. A mirror in the throne room reflects another throne room, where everything is slightly off more symmetrical, eerily clean, and the statue of Zeus is smiling too much. You report this to Athena. She frowns. It's a metaphysical breach, she says, sipping something that may or may not be liquefied logic. He's getting clever. You offer to tighten the seals. She shakes her head. No, that'll make him angrier. You suggest giving him something to read. Athena thinks, maybe Hesiod. The next day, you slide Theogony under the jar's rim and hope for the best. It doesn't go well. The jar erupts in offended humming. A bolt of pure embarrassment strikes the east wing. Someone's scroll collection spontaneously translates itself into aggressive poetry. Prometheus, who's been unusually quiet, says, "Told you it wouldn't last." You ask what he means. "Containment never holds," he mutters, not looking up from his cave mural of regret, especially not for people who think they invented destiny. Scholars in later centuries would argue whether this entire period was real or allegorical, whether Zeus's imprisonment represented seasonal retreat, a commentary on power, or just the collective desire to take a long divine nap. Fringe academics once claimed the jar itself was symbolic of the human skull containing the mind. Yes, but unable to silence thought. You don't know about that. You just know the jar is now singing, softly, mockingly, in a falsetto, and one of the seals is cracking. You don't remember agreeing to babysit a jar that sings, but here you are, again. The falsetto has evolved. It's not just humming now, it's belting. Occasionally in ancient Phrygian, occasionally in what sounds like a passive-aggressive lullaby. You've tried covering the jar with sacred linens, stacking olive branches on top, even politely asking it to please lower the volume. Nothing works. Hera stops by and listens for a moment. He's doing his I Am Olympus aria again. She sighs. Ignore it. Easy for her to say. She has an entire suite with cloud insulation and a harpist who plays over divine tantrums. You, meanwhile, are living in a side chamber where the walls sweat lightning and the floors hum with overconfidence. But it's not the singing that worries you. It's the smell, the faint whiff of scorched cedar, mixed with rain-soaked pride. A divine weather pattern is brewing inside the jar clouds you shouldn't be able to see, wind that shouldn't exist, a crackling tension like static before a confession. You consult with Hecate. She draws a circle in powdered bone, peers into a mirror that reflects your reflection blinking 3 seconds late, and says, the jar is reaching critical metaphor. You blink. Critical what? Metaphor, she repeats. Too many divine symbols in one container. It's distorting causality. Something's going to leak. And that's when it hits you. Zeus isn't just angry. He's plotting. He's waiting. You've read this part in older scrolls, the ones tucked into temple basements, the ones no one quotes in polite company. In some versions of the myth, the gods never dared to trap Zeus. In others, he let them think he was trapped. And in a few rare whispered accounts, the jar is simply empty. Not literally, conceptually. A decoy. You race back to the chamber. The jar is humming louder now. The seals are glowing. The air tastes like tin and bad decisions. You try the failsafe recite the true name of Zeus, a phrase only uttered during the winter solstice while holding a fig leaf and wearing no sandals. You've practiced it. You say it now. Nothing. The jar just sings louder now in 3-part harmony. You back away. Athena arrives with a scroll, breathless. He's breached metaphor. We've run out of myth. What does that mean? It means, she says grimly, we're about to be reminded why Zeus was king in the first place. The jar lifts off the pedestal. Not physically, existentially. It begins to glow with a kind of light usually reserved for revelations and near-death epiphanies. You can't blink. You can't breathe. You can only feel it, the raw heat of unchecked ego, the crackling hum of divine entitlement, the smell of 1,000 temples worth of incense and bronze sweat. And then silence. Not peace, silence. The kind that means someone just decided something permanent. And from within the jar, a voice low, amused, unmistakably smug. You're going to regret that. You do regret it. Instantly. Because the jar, glowing, levitating, now slightly vibrating to a divine drumbeat only it can hear, begins to crack. Not dramatically. Not with a shatter and a flash. No. It fractures like old pride quiet. Patient. Inevitable. A hairline fissure runs down the side, releasing a breath of air that smells like the moment before a thunderstorm files a lawsuit. You back away slowly, whispering a very ancient word for oops. Hera enters just in time to see a sliver of light leak out silver blue and slow-moving. Like moonlight squeezed through a keyhole. She exhales through her nose. So, she says, voice steady as stone. He found the loophole. You ask what loophole? The one where we didn't actually agree on how long he'd stay in there. You blink. That's not how jars are supposed to work. Athena storms in next. Scrolls flying. Hair frizzed. The jar is collapsing under semantic strain. She snaps, rifling through ancient binding clauses. We should have used metaphor locks, not symbolic ones. And someone she glares at, Hermes. who just arrived with a bowl of grapes forgot to file the divine ethics paperwork. Hermes shrugs. I brought snacks. Meanwhile, the fissure widens. Inside, you catch a glimpse. Not of Zeus himself, no mortal or minor immortal can really see him. But you see impressions. A silhouette made of thunderclouds and expectation. A face that isn't a face, but a crown of skies. Hands of judgment. A grin that crackles across the walls of Olympus. And then he speaks again, softly this time. You all forgot who built the ceiling. The jar shudders. The hydra guarding the chamber slinks behind a pillar. A marble statue of Hera collapses spontaneously, probably out of spite. You run. Not far. Just enough to not be the first one vaporized if lightning starts making executive decisions. From a safe-ish corner, you watch as the jar begins to unfold. Not break. Not explode. Unfold. Like a concept being rewritten in real time. Space warps. Time hiccups. A fresco of the Titanomachy erases itself and redraws with Zeus twice the size. This is no longer just an escape. It's a rebranding. Zeus steps out. Not literally metaphorically. Mythologically. Ego first. His essence pours out like molten divinity, coalescing into a shape that resembles Zeus, sounds like Zeus, and definitely thinks it's Zeus. The ceiling above shifts colour. The clouds gather. You feel the familiar crackle in your fillings. He looks around. Was that really necessary, he asks. No one answers. He turns to you, the jar keeper, the seal checker, the one who fed him Hesiod. I like the lullabies, he says. You nod, unsure whether this is praise or the start of divine retribution. And then he smiles. Not a kind smile, not a murder smile either. A political smile. I forgive you, he says. You feel your knees go wobbly. Forgiveness from Zeus is rarely good news. It's like being offered a golden chariot and realizing it's parked on a trapdoor. Still, he stretches. The air pops. Lightning crawls across his shoulders like lazy snakes. He glances toward the other gods. Well, he says, arms open wide, shall we reset the narrative? The council doesn't move. Even Hera pauses. Because everyone knows what this means. He's back. And this time, he's revised. You don't remember sitting down, but suddenly you're on the floor. It's marble, polished, warm, possibly judging you. Above, Zeus glides across the chamber like he never left, or like the last few weeks were merely a creative sabbatical. The other gods form a wide semicircle, giving him that particular kind of space reserved for very dangerous ideas in expensive sandals. He doesn't shout, he doesn't thunder, he narrates. This is a new era, he announces, hands raised like he's parting the metaphysical sea of awkward tension. No more jars, no more mutinies, just Olympus, refined, optimized. Athena mutters something about corporate speak under her breath. You catch a glimpse of the jar behind him no longer glowing, just ordinary, empty, the way a stage feels after the actors leave. A little sad, a little relieved. Zeus turns to Hera. My love, he says smoothly, shall we rule together again? She stares at him for a long, cold beat. Then, ever so gently, she folds her arms and says, let's see if you can last a week without electrifying the furniture first. There are no cheers, no thunderous applause. Olympus simply exhales. But underneath it all, the polite nods. The careful rearranging of divine robes, there's something else. Doubt. You hear it whispered in the corners, from the nymphs carrying nectar trays, from the winds rustling scrolls in Athena's library, even from the cicadas outside who are not technically employed by Olympus, but have opinions nonetheless. Because Zeus hasn't apologized. Not really. He's reframed everything. He was testing them. He wanted to see who remained loyal. He allowed the jar to happen. A trial. A necessary pause. A reset. Prometheus rolls his eyes so hard they squeak. You sneak away after the speech. You need air. The sky is thick with the smell of newly reasserted authority lightning, leather polish, and just a dash of narcissism. You walk the edge of Olympus, where clouds drift like lazy whales, and that's when you hear it, a faint tapping. Back in the jar chamber, you return slowly, warily. Everyone else is celebrating or pretending to. You lean in. The jar is still. You place a hand on it. Tap. Again, faint, delicate. Inside the jar in a gap no one else can sense something else is moving. A fragment. A residue. You realize Zeus might not have escaped entirely. Not all of him. Myths are messy that way. They grow layers, shed skins, split selves. In some versions, he's always in the sky. In others, he's inside the jar still, radiating, watching. You take a step back. You think of Hesiod's line, even the mightiest fall, but only the clever rise twice. You leave the jar where it is. You say nothing. Olympus isn't ready for that version of the story. Yet, you try not to think about the jar anymore. After all, Zeus is back technically functional, mostly symmetrical, and disturbingly energetic for someone who just spent several eons being metaphorically stewed. Olympus moves on, sort of. The gossip shifts from who put the king in the jar to what's he going to do now? You attend the first post-jar council meeting. Zeus enters with his classic flair dramatic cape swirl, thunder at his heels, and that half smile he thinks looks humble. He calls the meeting to order by declaring the word order 3 times, louder each time. You suspect he rehearsed it. He announces reforms, thunder quota limits, revised festival schedules, a brief mention of anger management, disguised as emotional lightning redirection workshops. Everyone nods politely. But no one forgets. Not really. You begin to notice how the others watch him now not with awe but with measured caution, like standing next to a highly polished vase on a wobbly table. Hera's smile is distant. Poseidon keeps checking the ceiling. Hades doesn't even show up. You, meanwhile, have been reassigned. No more jar duty. Now you're in charge of Olympus Archives. They hand you a key and a scroll labelled Authorized Access Only. Inside the archives are stories, thousands of them. Fables, prayers, dream fragments, even older myths that contradict the current myth. You're told to reorganize, translate, sanitize. You open one papyrus labelled The Jar That Shouldn't Have Opened. You don't remember writing it, and yet the handwriting is yours. Later, in the starlight-strewn corridors of Olympus, you begin to suspect that myths are less about truth and more about consensus. If enough people agree on what happened, it becomes history. And if Zeus declares that the jar was just a metaphor for rebirth, then well, most bards will nod along. But you know what you saw? You saw cracks that healed too fast. You saw a version of Zeus that wasn't quite done cooking crawl out of that vessel and re-enter the world with selective amnesia and suspicious charisma. And deep in the archives, behind scrolls with titles like The Time He Married His Sister Twice and How to Clean a Pegasus Stall in 3 Easy Hymns, you find a forgotten hymn, just 6 lines, written in a dialect no longer spoken aloud. It ends with the phrase, "The king who escapes himself must one day meet the part that stayed behind." You look around. The torches flicker. The wind is inside the walls again. You consider telling Athena, or Hecate, or even Hermes, but something stops you, because deep down you realize they already know. They're just waiting to see which Zeus they really let out. It starts with shadows that don't match their owners. You're fetching a scroll one morning, something about drought rituals and divine irrigation, when you notice that your shadow doesn't yawn when you do. It just stands there, watching. You blink. It blinks later. You mention it to a junior muse, and she nods far too quickly before vanishing into a column. Olympus is wrong, not broken, just slightly tilted. Zeus strolls the halls like everything's normal. He hosts more banquets than usual. He unveils a 400-foot golden statue of himself riding a thunderbolt shaped like a dolphin. He names a constellation after his own eyebrows. But even he seems thinner. Not physically, mythologically. Like his story has too many footnotes. You remember the jar. You remember what stayed inside. The shadows grow longer. On the 3rd day, a statue of Zeus in the West Wing begins weeping honey. On the 5th day, a dove flies backward through the main hall, screaming in Homeric Greek. On the 7th, All the nectar turns to salt water. You report it. Zeus smiles too quickly and says, "Ah, mythic fluctuations. Perfectly natural." He then assigns you to spiritual pest control, which is a real department now, complete with its own badge. You take it, but you also start keeping notes. Whispers follow you at night. Not words, just tones. Dissonant chords that don't belong to any hymn. You visit the jar again. It's still there, untouched in the corner of the vault of forgotten consequences. But it feels heavier, denser, like a secret rehearsing itself. Athena appears one evening unsummoned. She looks tired. "He left something behind," she says. You don't speak. You both stare at the jar. Its surface is dull now, but your reflection moves ever so slightly slower than you do. "What do we do?" you ask. She sighs. We wait. The part we trapped wasn't just power. It was accountability, fear, doubt. He didn't escape whole. He escaped loud. You nod slowly. And this part, Athena looks at you. It's growing. Somewhere in the distance, thunder crackle, but it's too soft, too rhythmic. Like someone practicing. You step back. Olympus throws another feast. Zeus tells stories about his time in the jar like it was an extended sabbatical. He jokes about writing a book. Poseidon laughs too hard. Hermes draws little lightning bolts in the gravy. But you, Hera, Athena, you're all watching the same thing. The jar never really stopped humming. And now it's humming in harmony. You start sleeping with your sandals on. Not because you expect a midnight ambrosia emergency, but because something's coming. You feel it in the floor, in the scrolls, in the way the stars over Olympus have begun blinking in unfamiliar sequences, as if they're spelling something only the jar understands. Zeus doesn't notice, or pretends not to. He's too busy launching his new project Zeusfest, a 3-week celebration of himself, featuring plays, sacrifices, interpretive thunder dancing, and horrifyingly a one-man show titled Me, Myself, and Me Again. Hera declines to attend. You're placed on storm logistics, again, and yet you keep visiting the jar, quietly, always alone. You tell the guards you're just checking for myth seepage, which is a vague enough excuse that no one asks questions. Inside the vault, the air has changed. It's denser now, like syrup or unspoken blame. And the jar is no longer dormant. It's listening. You whisper to it sometimes. You don't know why. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's because the thing inside isn't just Zeus's leftovers. It's every repressed god breath of Olympus. Every broken oath. Every time they said, "Let's not talk about that." And it remembers. One night you touch the jar just once, just lightly, and it shows you something. Not a vision. Exactly. More like a story seed. A glimpse of a different Olympus. One where Zeus never escaped. One where the gods learn to lead without fear. One where Metis speaks again, and her daughter Athena doesn't have to carry her silence alone. Then it fades. You stumble back, heart racing. Not because it was frightening, but because it was possible, and maybe still is. You find Athena in her library. She's already read the vision. Of course she has. What do we do, you ask? She's quiet for a long time. Then, without looking up, we plant it. You blink. Plant the story. She nods. Tuck it into the myths. One line at a time. A different ending. A quieter thunder. So you begin. Subtle edits to scrolls. Whispered phrases in rituals. A new myth about balance, not dominance. A rumour that the jar was never meant to trap Zeus, but to protect the world from what he left behind. Hera helps. So does Hecate. Even Hermes, eventually, leaves anonymous graffiti in sacred places. The king who divides himself forgets which half is the storm. The jar hums louder. Zeusfest continues, but the story's growing now, not his story, yours. The story where power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it listens. You wake up the morning of the eclipse. It wasn't scheduled. You know this because Helios is livid, and when the sun god is upset, the clouds sulk and the olives drop from trees in protest. The air is strange, too quiet. Even the cicadas are holding their breath. And the jar is singing again, not in Zeus's falsetto, not in metaphor, in something older, something before language. You find yourself walking toward it, unbidden, sandals slapping against the marble like a heartbeat. Around you, the gods gather in 2s and 3s, silent, solemn, as if they all felt the tug, as if the jar is calling the parts of them they've buried. It glows, but not with power, with memory, and then it opens. No cracks, no shatters, just a sigh. A long, tired breath that smells like wet stone, old thunder, and olive trees that remember when the world was quieter. You brace yourself, but nothing comes out. No lightning, no voice, no Zeus 2.0, only stillness. You peer inside. It's empty. Truly, utterly empty. You feel your stomach twist. Either something escaped, or something changed. And then, behind you, Zeus speaks. I thought it would be louder. You turn. He's alone. No retinue, no thunder. Just him. A man in sandals and sky-blue robes, eyes reflecting weather. You nod. It's done. He doesn't answer immediately. Just walks slowly toward the jar. Places a hand on its rim like he's greeting an old enemy, or maybe an older self. I don't remember what I left in here, he says, softly. Anger, fear, some twisted idea of what it meant to be king. You say nothing. He sighs. I don't feel it anymore, whatever it was. And for the first time, Zeus looks tired, not diminished, not defeated, just human enough to be forgiven. The gods drift away, slowly, respectfully. There's nothing left to see. You stay. Zeus turns to you. You kept the story alive. You shrug. It's what I do. He smiles a real one this time, and walks away. You're alone now. You sit beside the jar, place your hand inside. It's cool, dry, smooth, empty. Yes, but not hollow. You realize the jar never held him. It held the part of us that believes we must conquer to lead, dominate to protect. That silence is the price of peace. But it's over now. The myth rewrote itself, because you planted it. And someone will read it, and someone after that, until one day, no one remembers the roar, only the quiet, only the jar. So now, as Olympus fades behind you, soft clouds drifting like old memories across a quiet sky, you stretch out your limbs and feel the weight lift. The jar is sealed again, not by fear, but by choice. No humming, no thunder, just the gentle hush of a story that's been told all the way to the end. You lie back, head resting on warm marble, sandals kicked off, and feel the stars above begin their slow, familiar rotation. The night is cooler now, without the storm always looming. Even the wind seems to whisper a lullaby, not words. Exactly. Just breath, just rhythm, just peace. The gods for once are sleeping, and so can you. You think about Metis, about the jar, about the part of power that doesn't need to raise its voice, about how myths bend, adapt, exhale. You've walked through divine tantrums, goat-nanny hideouts, jar logistics, and ego reformatting, and now you rest. Because this chapter strange, slow, flickering like candlelight at the bottom of the world is over. Let it dissolve. Let the thunder stop pacing. Let the sky hold you for a while. Your eyes grow heavy. The stars blink slower now. You made it through the myth. Sleep, little scribe of stories. Sleep.